Yeah, so the Mavericks needed the win last night. They couldn't pull it out. Luka fouled out with about 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Kyrie obviously couldn't handle the load after he left. A few media members are blaming Luka and saying that his pouting and whining towards the ref is causing them the game or the series. Yeah. So Luka's never faced any heat like this or any backlash. Do you think it's at all warranted?
Okay. So I am going to try once again to preserve my title as the most honest and fair man in sports media. And that means criticizing my large adult Slovenian son where it's warranted, and it also might mean pumping the brakes on some of the hyperbole that really got rolling by my dear friend, Brian Windhorst, right after the game. And I am not talking bad about Brian. And in fact, I texted with Brian this morning, and I'm not going to, reveal private text, but I will say what my first text was. Too hard on Luka, ! And I don't think Brian would be mad. I will reveal his first text back to me, which was, that's been a big problem for Luka in his career. People being too hard on him. I sensed some sarcasm there, Brian. And then we went back and forth. And I also told him a take I had that he replied to with, don't go with that. But I am going to go with it at some point. So here's the thing. Windy crushed him. Absolutely crushed him. Everyone since then has joined the crushing. Here, to me, are the fair criticisms, and then I will get into where I think we've lost the plot a bit. Fair criticism. It's the god dog NBA Finals, and you cannot give up 5-on-4 transition baskets because you are either barking at the ref or laying on the ground trying to sell a call. That can't happen. That is on Luka. Undeniably, that's on Luka. I'm going to say another one. It is the NBA Finals. Your team can't win without you, which is an important element here. Even if you think you're getting hosed by the refs, which Luka always thinks, he usually has a bit of an argument, but there is clearly a boy who cried wolf element to it, which is if you're always complaining, then we don't know if it's actually a missed call. There was a sequence early in the game when Luka throws, it was kind of an encapsulation of what is got to be frustrating for Luka. He throws a perfect lob to Derek Lively. Lively misses the dunk. They get the offensive rebound. Luka drives to the basket, gets fouled twice on the play. They don't call either foul. They say Mavericks ball, and then the Celtics challenge, and it's like, well, he got fouled twice, but the ball went off him, so the call's overturned. So
you want to call that a no question foul though? Like that's like that's another one of those things. I didn't really see the clear foul in that. You're talking about when he threw it out of bounds and they called it on Boston initially, and then they challenged it, overturned it.
So I am talking about when Boston challenged it, but if you don't think it was clear foul, then you're thinking of a different play. It's not when he threw it out of bounds. He was going up for a layup. He gets fouled on the arm by Jaylen Brown and then fouled on the hand by Drew Holiday. The broadcast said that about how obvious he was fouled twice. So I'm just setting a context here. I wish we could pull the video for the pod. But he complains every time. So in that instance, maybe if he didn't conduct himself the way he normally does, if you then go to the refs and say, man, I got fouled twice on that, and now it's going to be Celtics ball, maybe they feel like they owe you one. They're never going to feel like they owe Luka anything. And that's on him and the way he treats the refs from opening tip to the end of the game. That is a fair criticism. Him being hunted defensively is obviously happening. That is a fair criticism. I think what we are seeing is that there is one guy in league history that's been able to have that type of offensive workload demand from game 1 to game 100 and still be able to go on deep playoff runs and have everything left in the tank on both sides of the ball. It's one guy ever, and Luka's not quite in that same shape as that guy. And so Luka's fitness is a fair critique. The way he lets the refs get in his head is a fair critique. And the fact that the Celtics were able to hunt him on defense, those are all fair critiques. Here's another one. They needed him for them to beat this team, he's got to score 35 a night. He hasn't done that yet. Kyrie did it last night for the first time. So those are all fair critiques. I was ready to crown Luka the best player in the world. That can't happen now. Okay? So all of that is legitimate and fair, and this is part of the process. And in Wendy's defense, what Wendy was saying more this morning than in that clip that's going viral last night is that he believes one day Luka will be a more complete player, will be holding the Larry O'Brien and the Finals MVP trophy, and will say, I learned from 2024. Usually about how it goes. I think there were right there, Wendy was kind of making some LeBron allusions where LeBron talked about learning from 2011. Now, that was a different circumstance. I don't think people think that Luka's melting down the way people think LeBron did in that series. So all of those criticisms are fair, okay? But here is what also must be said. No matter what you think Luka's defensive deficiencies are, in that game last night, in the 38 minutes he played, the Mavericks won by 9. And in the 10 minutes he sat, they lost by 16. So whatever you think he takes away defensively, which is legitimate, whatever he adds offensively is significant enough that even last night, which people are calling the worst game of his career, they beat the Celtics handily in the 38 minutes he played and got whooped in the 10 minutes he didn't. Now, that speaks to why it is very important that he not foul out and why he has to find a way to stay on the court. So I think those criticisms are fair, and then we will get to the fouling out thing in a moment, but it looked, DeMonte, like you wanted to say something, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, his plus minus while he's on and off the court. Mm-hmm. I get that, but I mean, does it matter if at the end of the day he's still going to have a pissy attitude with the refs and make him have an extra target on his back?
Well, listen, I think that he needs to mature in that regard. I think that he is I've told you guys before, and I know that you kind of disagree. I don't know if you disagreed with me, but the point I made a couple rounds ago, which was Luka's always going to have a problem. Up to this point, he's always had a problem with the refs. The question is, are we getting snarling, angry Luka or hands up, rolling his eyes, woe is me Luka? Because snarling, angry Luka is the scariest offensive player in the league. Hands up, rolling his eyes, woe is me Luka can get in his own way. And so I think that those are all fair criticisms. Now, let's talk about him fouling out. I thought the 5th and 6th fouls could have gone either way, but you can't put yourself in that position for the 6th foul. I thought the 5th foul, you could have called a hook on Jaylen Brown. They didn't. I thought, or was it Tatum? I think it was Tatum. And the 6th foul was a to me, a 50-50 call because Luka's feet weren't set, but there was a push-off. It felt to me, tell me if you agree, Demonze, as someone who's watching rooting for the Celtics, that if they had called that a charge and Boston had challenged it, they wouldn't have overturned the charge. They called it a block. Dallas challenged it. They didn't overturn the block. Do you think that's fair? Like that was a judgment call that could have gone either way?
Yeah, I do. I do think that like it was very close. It was very close to him being set or not set. And I think with him having the attitude that he has towards the refs, he's not going to get that benefit of the doubt. They're not going to be looking to give you charges if that's how you are the whole game before.
Right. And that part is fair, is that you've got to recognize the refs are human. And if you're abusing them from the opening minute, you're just not going to get the benefit of the doubt on stuff. And so some of this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Luka thinks the refs are out to get him, so he, goes after them, and that makes the refs more likely out to get him. So all of that, so I'm not making excuses, and I'm not blaming the refs. But here is what I want to say about Luka fouling out and the reactions to it. You have a player who is an offense unto himself, unlike almost any player in league history, whose team is in the NBA Finals, thanks to him more than anyone else by a massive measure, who in a critical championship in the balance finals game gets hunted repeatedly defensively, loses his composure a number of times, and fouls out of that game. I just told you about Steph Curry in Game 6 of 2016. Now, I also told you about Luka. The difference, I guess, there is Steph's team was trying to win a championship that game rather than stave off elimination. And Luka was whining earlier than Steph was, but Steph did end up culminating with throwing his mouthpiece into the crowd, hitting a fan, and his wife saying the league was rigged for ratings or money. She doesn't know which. Now, I, once again trying to be the bastion of fairness and consistency, crushed Steph for that. Crushed him. So, Luka's got to get similar heat. But my colleagues did not. Nobody was out here saying this is, Steph Curry. And now he had already won a championship. He had won 2 league MVPs. I understand that. But this idea that we've never seen something like this, we actually saw something exactly like it. Very similar. A guy who is unimpeachably brilliant offensively, whose weakness on defense can be exploited in the playoffs, and smart teams will hunt him, getting in late foul trouble of a critical finals game, fouling out and losing his ass. We've seen it. And that's why I push back a little bit on some of the nuclear level Luka takes. Because I do think we need a bit of a breath and recognize, hey, the criticism is warranted when you are trying to become the best player in the world. You are held to a best player in the world standard, and you need to overcome. You need to be A+ when your team's only expecting an A. All of those things. Also, the pendulum swinging so far in the other direction as if Luka is the reason the Mavs lost, I reject out of hand. Luka is... Kyrie was brilliant last night. Luka is the reason they're in this spot. Now, Demonte, I can see from the look on your face in the split screen, you disagree to a degree, which is fine. I think most of the audience probably does. So go ahead.
Wait, what you said that you can't count that. You can't put this on Luka. This isn't Luka's fault. It was just Luka's fault in that game. And the game three is
what I'm saying is that I feel the pendulum has swung in the last 12 hours so far out of whack to where the discussion turned to Luka is the problem for the Mavs. Luka's the solution for the Mavs. Luka's the reason the Mavs are here. This was a brutal moment for him, and it was, if we're being honest, a game that the Mavs appeared down 2-0 at home to let go of the rope in that third quarter. And that's on your leader. That is fair criticism. The hyperventilating about about him fouling out of the game as if we've never seen that, when we saw it in a very famous moment in the NBA Finals with a player whose roles and responsibilities to his team are very similar to Luka's, which is you create our entire offensive system is thanks to your one-of-one talents, and we're going to have to hide you defensively. That's where I felt like the criticism was out of whack. And that's what I texted Wendy. Wendy disagrees. I also do want to say, there aren't three people in basketball media that I have more affection and professional respect for than Wendy. So I'm not attacking him. I thought he has such a respected voice that if and he so rarely goes after anybody that if like let me use another person. I'll use Stephen A., another guy that I'm friends with and that I respect. If Stephen A. had said the exact thing Wendy said, I don't think it sets the conversation the way it did when Wendy did it, because Stephen A. says very bombastic, if you will, things all the time. It's part of the gig. Just like I do, by the way. So it's not a shot at all. I mean, yeah, he's polarizing, and he's out here giving takes. Because Wendy so rarely crushes somebody. When he does, to me, it signaled to the whole basketball world, oh, it is going to be feast on Luka Day. And I think, by the way, that I'm going to name another guy that I have massive respect and affection for. I think Van Pelt felt the same way, because Van Pelt later in the postgame said, man, I'm still processing Wendy taking a blowtorch to Luka. And so I thought that was a touch too harsh. Smart people can disagree. I thought it was a touch too harsh, in part because I didn't see 20% of it when Steph fouled out and the Warriors were in the midst of losing the 3-1 lead. I didn't see that. So that's where I fall on the Luka stuff. Go ahead.
I think it was like a sound the alarm type of thing. I think Windhorst coming out and saying that was just speaks to how dire the situation is. I do think that Curry and Luka are in a little bit different situations, being that Curry had already been there when he had already done it. Luka hasn't, and it's just like, you're finally here, and that stuff has got to go out of the window. I think it's like a kind of sound the alarm type of thing.
So that, DeMonte, is a great take. It's a fair take. I think it's how most people feel. It is level-headed and legitimate. I think that is, and this is where track record matters. That moment for Steph felt totally aberrant. It felt like, what is happening? It felt like a one-off meltdown, even though he did then the next year fling his mouthpiece into the crowd again, but he hadn't done it up to that point in his career. And he had track record matters, And he had earned such massive goodwill, and he already was a champion. So you couldn't have the take, Steph Curry's defense is going to stop you from winning a championship. My pushback is really twofold. One is, I just think it was a little too harsh, the general Luka conversation today and last night. And the other one is the idea that, with Luka playing defense like this, the Mavs can't win a title. That I think that he should be better. I think at 25, you're supposed to get better across the board. Like, he's not a finished product. I think all that's true. But I also think the Mavs can win a title with his defense as it is. I think that other guys have to pick him up because of what his deficiencies are. But the idea that and last night, the reason I brought up the plus minus is people can show me as many clips as they want of him losing Sam Hauser, of him losing Jaylen Brown, of all of it. The fact of the matter is this, even in that game, which was one of the worst defensive performances he's had all postseason, when he was on the court, they won those minutes. Now, let me also be fair in this regard before we move on. Getting just 10% better defensively, 20% better defensively, in my opinion, is what moved Joker from a great offensive player who I was not comfortable calling the best player in the world to best player in the world. And I thought one of the reasons the Nuggets didn't end up in the finals this year was he slipped a little defensively. And so that it is fair to say Luka needs to do the same thing. And it is fair to say that Joker's plus minus was always great and he was still subject to criticism. I'm not arguing Luka shouldn't be criticized. I'm not arguing he played well yesterday. I am arguing that I think it's been in the last 12 hours.
He's not the reason they're going to lose this series. Like, it's what you're...
Correct.
It's obviously not him, is what you're saying.
Correct. And so, like, that is the part of it that is frustrating me. The Bill James quote that I always go to, and sometimes I get this, because to whom much is given, much is expected. The best player... let me see if I can find the quote. The Bill James, let me see. Bill James blame best player, worst teams. So I can't find it. I think it's Bill James who said it, but regardless, the quote is, bad teams have an uncanny ability to blame their best players for their biggest problems. Now, obviously, the Mavs aren't a bad team, and I'm kind of mixing metaphors there because I don't think the Mavs are necessarily blaming Luka. But today is going to be across sports media, annihilate Luka Dončić day. It just is. Today is going to be if you're trying to win a championship, here is the list of players you would rather have. And if you make that list and you have more than 2 people on it, I think you're being disingenuous. If you want to say you're trying to win a championship, you'd rather have Joker, sure. And if you want to include Giannis, no problem. But if all of a sudden we go from one game of what's wrong with Jason Tatum to actually Jason Tatum's better than Luka, we've gone too far. And so that's just kind of what I'm pushing against. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show, and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.